Hello, and welcome to Bitesized Podcast. I'm your host, Andalee. Bitesized Podcast is a holistic nutrition podcast for pregnancy, postpartum, and baby starting solids, with some sprinkles of special guests to further educate you on all of the options available to support you on this journey. Today, in fact, we do have a special guest on the podcast, and I'm so excited for you to hear from her. But first, let's dig in a little bit to building trust with your baby as we start the solids journey. You may have already remembered me mentioning a few of these tidbits in previous episodes, but I wanted to dedicate a full episode on how to build trust with your baby. Firstly, if you haven't yet had a chance to listen to my episode on family meals, I would highly suggest doing so. This is one of the first ways to start building trust even before introducing solids. Having a routine and ritual around some meals will start a good foundation for including your child in feeling like part of the family unit and be a good signal that this is the beginning of a mealtime. These signals are extremely beneficial to cueing your baby about mealtimes. If you've ever looked into sleep training, they also talk about cues and how to utilize them. So be sure to go listen to that episode for more on the importance of family meals. Second, just as you are trying to cue your child about the impending mealtime or food being offered, it's also important to watch and listen for your child's cues. As a parent, being able to anticipate your child's needs for food as well as when they are done eating or don't want to eat at all is important. When you respond to their need or desire in the way they are expecting or hoping, this will continue to foster the relationship of trust between you and them. Some cues to look for hunger are sucking on their hands, nuzzling into your body, looking for the breast, smacking their lips, or when they've developed some language, of course, asking for food. Some cues that might indicate they are done eating or not interested is avoiding the high chair, shaking their head side to side, pushing food away, or playing with their food rather than exploring it and trying it. So be sure to respond to these cues as needed to further build that trust. Next, it's important to offer food at regular intervals and on a consistent basis. Now, like I've mentioned before, when your baby is 6 months and just starting, this doesn't have to be every single day, but every few days. Once they are between 9 months and a year, they will reach 3 offerings a day, depending on the child. It's also important to remember that while breast milk or formula will still be their primary source of nutrition, and while we as adults can sometimes be terrible for going the whole day without eating, it's important to develop this relationship with your child where they can anticipate and expect food regularly. Creating a meal schedule can definitely help make this easier for you. Now, I don't want you to get too strict or hard on yourself. Create a schedule, have a plan, but be flexible. Your child may or may not want food when you offer it. You might have a last-minute thing come up and not be able to offer solids on that day, but just do so when you can. This next one we've talked about a bit before, but it's very important in building that trust. Remember to ensure your mindset is, I am offering my child food, and it's up to them what to eat and how much. Not only does this take a lot of pressure off of you, but gives your child some ownership and the chance to listen to their own bodies about what to eat and when they feel full. This means you don't need to comment on how much they ate, coerce them to eat the food you put in front of them, or bribe them with treats. When you offer healthy food at regular intervals and keep comments to yourself, your child will be able to eat what they need to support their growth and satiate their hunger. So to recap, to build trust, you're going to want to establish a routine and ritual around family mealtimes, listen to your child's hunger cues, offer food at regular and consistent intervals, and keep a positive, no-pressure mindset when it comes to offering them food. Now, this last one I'm throwing in because all of the others are important no matter what, but this one in particular is interesting because it more so applies to baby-led weaning. But those who practice baby-led weaning as opposed to purees might develop more trust with their baby, as food offered in the whole form will help your baby to begin to build memories about said foods, as opposed to purees, which all tend to look very similar and have the same texture. Some purees might taste more savory while others may taste more sweet. So in this sense, your child may not have a way to distinguish what they are going to taste from what they might be expecting. Whereas baby-led weaning allows the child to recall the food, its colors, textures, shape, and taste, and will begin to associate that and what they're expecting to taste together. So as you begin adding flavors or other textures or combining more foods, your child may be more willing to try them, particularly when it's offered alongside or combined with something they know they like. Now, I don't say that to make you feel bad about whatever method you choose, and all babies should be offered finger foods by 9 months anyway, so don't stress about it. I promise you, if you implement the other strategies, your baby will still trust you, and as you introduce finger foods, the trust will only grow. If purees or combo is right for your family, go with your gut. Now, to round out our episode, I'm so excited to have Lucy here on the podcast. Welcome, Lucy, to Bitesized Podcast. Thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me.
Please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, sounds great. I'm a certified holistic nutritional consultant, and I specialize in pediatric nutrition. So that includes everything from preconception and everything that you can do to enhance your fertility, to postpartum nutrition, and then also starting solids. And then, of course, my biggest and most important job is being a mother. And I have a 19-month-old little boy named Leo.
Amazing. Tell us a little bit about what made you want to get into holistic nutrition.
Yeah. So I think before I move forward, I have to go back a little bit because my journey into motherhood was actually not so smooth. A few years ago, so 4 or 5 years ago, I actually suffered a miscarriage, and that was really, really devastating. But not only that, what was really tough was actually the lack of education and support that I received from my healthcare provider on what I could do from, preventing this from happening in the future and what I could do to heal my body. So I started to seek alternative and holistic care. And I really wanted to learn everything that I could about how I could support my body through any future pregnancies. So I went back to school. I studied holistic nutrition, and I really took my health into my own hands. So I had the intention from the very beginning of focusing on pediatric pre and postnatal nutrition. And that was kind of my journey. So when I went back to school, I really focused on that pediatric nutrition space, and then I continued to learn on my own too. So I found some really great resources like the Weston A. Price Foundation, and then some really great mentors and different resources like Thriving Foundations has been really fantastic to learn from, and just different avenues of education.
It's been really cool to see you become so passionate, and obviously has truly impacted your life and now is continuing to impact Leo's life as well. So tell us a little bit about how that started factoring into starting solids with Leo and what that journey looked like a little bit.
Yeah, so that was it was a really natural progression for me because it was the stage of life that I was in. I was in it. So when I was learning about preconception, I was trying to get pregnant. When I was learning about postpartum nutrition, I was postpartum. When I started to learn about starting solids and mindful nutrition for baby, my baby was getting ready to eat food. So yeah, it was just really relevant to my stage of life. So I was implementing all of these things I was learning in real time. So myself, my husband, and my son Leo have all been like little guinea pigs over, what I've been learning for the last few years. Yeah, it's been really cool and a natural progression.
I know when I did it, I had to always ask some people, and it was so cool to hear their stories. And I know you helped me a little bit. And yeah, it's so cool to be able to apply exactly what you're learning in the moment too, especially when you're trying to share with other moms and families.
Yeah. And I think, that's what makes it so much of a passion project for me because, it's my life, it's my family, it's our health, it's our well-being. So, so it's very relevant for us for sure.
Tell me and the audience a little bit about when you were starting solids with Leo. what was your thought process? What kind of things were you thinking before you got into it? And then as you started, what it all looked like?
So I started solids with Leo when he was like 6, maybe 6.5 months old. And I was really intentional with not only what I was feeding him, but at what times I was introducing certain foods to him. So I really took my time, and I focused on gut health. That was really paramount to our weaning journey. So I wanted to make sure that I was focusing on nutrient dense foods, foods that were going to be easy for him to digest, and foods that were really going to support his overall foundation of health, and not just feeding him for the sake of filling up his little belly. So I started with bone broth. That was the number one food that I started with for probably the first, I want to say like 2 weeks. And I was just, giving him an open cup and, giving him little sips, and that was really really cool to like see his expression when he started to like try this new food, because that's a big transition, going from being exclusively breastfed to eating food for the first time.
Especially like taste profile wise, because breast milk is so sweet and bone broth would definitely be like more savory.
Savory, salty, even just something that like he'd never had before. So it's really funny. So yeah, I started with bone broth, and again, the reason for that was because I wanted to focus on his gut health. Bone broth is a really great source of glutamine and glycine, which is going to help with that transition to starting solids. And then I went into some more like soft cooked vegetables. So things like sweet potato is a really nutrient dense food. I even, gave him some avocado. And then we did like some cod liver oil, which is really nutrient dense for growing babies. And then just to continue on with that like wide palette of different foods, we actually gave him sauerkraut as one of his first foods as well.
Incredible. Yes, very probiotic rich and distinct flavor again.
Yeah, exactly.
You seem to mostly take a baby-led weaning approach. How did you decide that? Did you maybe kind of do a combination?
Yeah, so I did a combination for sure. When it came to introducing some foods like avocado, for example, it was so slippery. So when he would try and hold on to it, he would just like crush it and it would go flying out of his hand. So he would get so frustrated, and it was just like really difficult for him to eat some of those like really slippery foods, even things like banana. Like that was just really tough for him to eat. So with those foods, like I would mash them and then I would load it on a spoon and give him the spoon. So he was still working on those motor skills. He was still, getting the benefits of baby-led weaning, but in just an easier to eat food. So I would give him, some larger pieces of food that he would self-feed. We would do some purees. So it's definitely a combination, because I'm a firm believer that you really have to do what works best for you and what works best for your family, and what you're comfortable with too. So there's no hard rule on the proper way to feed babies. I think you just have to find what works for you, and that's what worked for us in the beginning.
Yes, totally agree. And I think there can be a lot of differing opinions and information, and overwhelmed just as a parent in deciding or feeling like you have to pick one. So I love that you just found what worked for you guys, even on a food by food basis. That's incredible.
And then with some of those slippery foods too, there was a couple things that we also tried. Like there's like different like crinkle knives. I don't know if you've ever heard of those, but it's like this knife that just kind of has like these ridges on it. So when I was feeding him an avocado, I would, cut it with a crinkle knife, and that just gave it like just a little bit more of just an easier thing for him to hold on to, rather than like a slippery, flat wedge of avocado. So even things like that were helpful for us in the beginning as well.
And you talked about some of the benefits you saw in the baby-led weaning process and approach. Talk to us a little bit about what you specifically saw with Leo.
I've always tried to give him a lot of autonomy around his food choices. for how much he's eating, what he's eating. Yeah, so I think, giving him that autonomy, he's had a lot more confidence, he's had a lot more independence. And then also just with his like motor skills, like that is just like one of the biggest things that I noticed. Like, giving him a spoon at he was like 6 months old and he was like able to like self feed at that time. So I was like, that's so cool that he just like instinctively knew what to do. Yeah, so those were definitely some big ones there.
Amazing. And then on the opposite end, did you have any fears that going into it that you were nervous about, and how did you sort of work through that?
Yeah, definitely. Choking, of course, is always a fear when you're introducing food to your baby for the first time. So that was a big one. Allergies or baby having food reactions was a big one. And then just making sure that he was properly nourished with all of the best foods for him and his little body. So how I kind of got past a few of those, choking, that one was, and of course, like we experienced all of these things. All of my fears came to life. We experienced not quite choking, but close to. But so for choking, like we took a CPR course online. So not only myself, but my husband and my mother-in-law, the three people that are going to be primarily feeding Leo. I made sure that we were all educated on what to do in the event of choking. And then also just being able to identify the difference between gagging and choking. So, yeah, once I took that online course, that was really helpful, gave me a lot of confidence surrounding choking. And with the allergies, I was quite gradual in the way that I introduced allergens and allergenic foods to Leo, but he still had some reactions in the beginning. So, for example, like the first time that I gave him eggs, he had a reaction. So he got like red, kind of puffy spots around his mouth and on his chest, the places that the food actually touched his skin. So that was the first time that he had it. And me as a new mom, I panic. I called 811, which is like the health link line here in Alberta. I talked to a nurse and she kind of told me what to look out for if it were to be like a serious reaction. And thankfully, his reaction wasn't serious. So I held off on giving him eggs again for a little while. Thankfully, he's outgrown that allergy. But another one that's present for us is cashews. So he's actually allergic to cashews, and it doesn't seem like that's going to be one that he will outgrow in his lifetime. So, I'm just really mindful when we're eating out of what he's eating. Again, there's always a risk of cross contamination and coming into contact with these foods. So I make sure to keep. I use homeopathy in our household, so I make sure to keep a remedy for allergies in my bag at all times. That works well for us. And in the event of an allergy, I also have an EpiPen in my backpack.
Yeah, I think that's really important that parents feel that they can take some of that risk or like fear and dive into some resources that will help them overcome it, and then also be prepared.
Yeah, so I think you just need to be educated and just do your research, make sure that you know what you're going to do in the event of these things happening before they happen. So, talk with your healthcare provider about how you're going to react to any kind of allergenic foods or, what you're going to do in these kinds of emergencies, just in case, so that if something does happen, you know how you're going to react beforehand.
And so with mealtimes at home, what does it kind of look like for you guys as a family, or during the day or evening? What does that look like?
So I'm fortunate to be able to stay at home with Leo. So we eat 3 meals a day together. My husband is usually home for dinner time, sometimes breakfast as well, which is great. So for us, we really take meal times as an opportunity to slow down and really just connect as a family. So we always eat dinner at the dinner table. I want to try and limit distractions as much as possible because, of course, with a toddler, they're super distracted anyway. But yeah, I try and limit distractions as much as possible so that we're focusing on the food that's in front of us and expressing gratitude and all of that good stuff. So no phones at the dinner table. We don't have a TV in this area of our house. And then I even sometimes like turn off any kind of music or any kind of background sounds so that we are just being present and focusing on the food that's in front of us.
And then you mentioned that your husband, and your mother in law are primarily the ones who are there when Leo is feeding. Um, what did that conversation look like? Because I know, especially with baby led weaning, it can be very new for some older generations. And so, what did that look like? And how did she kind of get on board with what you were hoping for Leo?
I'm really lucky that my mother-in-law, she's so receptive to new ideas and she's not a rigid person whatsoever. She knows that the way that we parent, and then even, the way that we feed Leo is different than, what most people do and historically what she would have seen. And, yeah, so she was totally on board and she was open to the idea. And, I gave her some resources on like different pages to follow on Instagram. And same thing with my husband. I got him on board and he was freaked out about it too, because the thought of like handing your baby this like chunk of sweet potato and telling them to eat it, like it's strange and it's not common. We're used to just giving babies a spoonful of baby food from a jar and feeding it to them that way. So baby led weaning definitely is it's different, but yeah, I'm really lucky that everyone that I have in my life and everyone that is surrounding Leo is totally receptive to these types of ideas, and they got on board once they started to understand the benefits. And that it really isn't any more dangerous than feeding your baby purees, as long as you know what to do in the event of there being some choking or gagging.
And then, what kinds of things do you think you did specifically that developed that trusting bond between you and Leo, or even Leo and the other people in his life who are feeding him? And how might this factor into the relationship with food moving forward?
Yeah. So we practice like more of an attachment parenting style in our household. So I think that was a huge factor in the bond that we have as a family. So early on, like I did a lot of baby wearing. We didn't do any kind of sleep training. Instead, like I chose to be a responsive parent, even in the middle of the night when I didn't want to be. And we just provide constant, like loving care and support to him. And I value his emotional well being as much as his physical well being. So I don't think that there's, a right way to parent for anyone, but this parenting method is really what has best suited our family's values. So that gave him a lot of autonomy. Like I was saying earlier, he's able to make decisions about what and how he's eating. So that's definitely factored into his relationship with food, and then just trusting those cues in his body. And I also involve Leo a lot in the kitchen. So early on, when he was a little baby, I would baby wear him all the time in the kitchen. So, I would be baking or cooking and I would be explaining to him, everything that I was doing. And who knows if he absorbs that information, but he always sees mom in the kitchen. And now with him being, 19 months old, I got him one of those like little learning towers. So he's actually at counter height with me, and I get him involved in the kitchen. So whenever I'm cooking breakfast or lunch or dinner, he's always right there with me, and he has his little job. So his job is usually to mix. So as soon as he sees me in the kitchen, he gets up on his tower and, he goes like this, like he's whipping it. And that's his job. So I'll say, mix, mix, mix. And, he stands there and he loves to get involved and he loves to learn. It's so messy and it can be so frustrating when he like dumps food everywhere. But, it's part of the process and you just got to embrace the mess sometimes.
Absolutely. So, with all of those benefits you're seeing, what do you hope that this foundation you're creating will do for Leo as he grows up and like makes his way into the world and starts to, be out making his own decisions about food, especially?
Yeah. So, first and foremost, I think that I've given him the foundation of health. And I think that's fantastic because from the beginning, I have been very mindful of what I've been feeding him, the quality of food, and how it's impacting his health. So I try and be very mindful of everything that I'm feeding him, but also with our baby led weaning approach, giving him autonomy over how and what he eats and how much he eats. It gives him a lot of independence and confidence overall.
Do you have any like personal successes you've seen so far that you're just like so excited about?
Yeah, so I think that the biggest one is definitely getting him involved in the kitchen. So he gets so excited and he takes pride in his meals. Like I find that he eats so much more when he has helped to cook something. So that's definitely a big win for us. I think that introducing him into a wide variety of foods has really helped to reduce him in being a picky eater. Like, for example, he's never once refused a food. He might try it and then decide that he doesn't like it and spit it out. But, if I'm offering him something, he's always going to try it. So I think that is a huge win. I'm never going to force something on him if he doesn't like it. I'm not trying to coerce him into eating more. I really trust that he can identify those cues within his body of how much he wants to eat. But yeah, I'm really happy that he's a pretty good eater, and yeah, he's willing to try anything. So that's a win.
That is a win for sure. And before we let you go, we've got the last few questions, but if you could offer 3 tips for families starting solids, what do you think your top 3 tips would be?
The first one is definitely to feed with intention. So ask yourself, why are you feeding a food to your baby? Is it just for the purpose of like filling them up? Or what's the reason for feeding that food? So think about it. Like if you're feeding baby salmon, for example, salmon has good fat is good for the brain. So I try and always feed my baby with intention, and yeah, just always think about why I'm feeding a food. And it doesn't have to be complicated, it really can be simple as that, but just take a second and think to yourself, why am I feeding this food? So that would be a big one. Second would be to prioritize quality. It's not always possible to eat everything organic and grass-fed. Like that's just not realistic for 99% of people, including myself. So I try and prioritize quality ingredients by like following the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. So I will eat organic from that Dirty Dozen list. And then from the Clean 15, I don't worry about it. And I don't eat organic from that list. And that's a good way to save some money. But where I will always spend my money is, quality meat, and then quality eggs as well. And then the third thing would be to embrace the mess because it really is so messy. It can be so frustrating. Your floors are going to be a disaster for the next, 2 years. Like to this day, my son is still such a messy eater, throws food all the time, but they're learning and they're exploring, and it's fun to watch them grow in that way. But yeah, just try and embrace the mess.
Very exciting. I love all of those for sure. And lastly, please tell us a bit about where to find you and how you're helping new families and new moms. I know you have an exciting workshop, so please plug it.
Yeah, for sure. So my Instagram is Naturally Nourished with Lucy. So I share a lot of information about pre and postnatal nutrition, starting solids, and I also host a series of workshops, which are always held virtually. So you can dial in from anywhere in the world. I have an upcoming workshop on June 12th, I'm pretty sure. And it's a starting solids workshop. So it's going to teach you everything that you might need to know about feeding your baby with intention, baby's first foods, and everything that you might need to know about introducing your baby to solid food for the first time.
Yes, I'm very excited for it. And I know you've put on quite a few workshops and I've only heard amazing things about them. So definitely recommend people checking that out and following you at Naturally Nourished with Lucy.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you again to Lucy for joining us. Be sure to follow her at Naturally Nourished with Lucy. Here is a reminder of all the discount codes I have for you. Needed vitamins for all your supplement needs, use code Bitesized for 20% off. Ovary for ovulation strips, pregnancy tests, and male fertility tests. Whether you're trying to get pregnant or avoid it, these are good for you and the environment. Bitesize 10 for 10% off. And finally, if you missed it in my Starting Solids download, be sure to check out Raising Humans Co. for all your silicone tableware needs. Use code Bitesized for 10% off by shopping at the link in the description. If you want to download my Starting Solids guide, be sure to head to the website for the freebie zone. It's bitesizedpodcast.com. You can also find all of the amazing things on our Instagram at bitesized.podcast. So thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you are feeling that much more confident about the Starting Solids journey with your baby. Please leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. And in case no one has told you today, you look radishing. Bye! For any studies I mentioned in this podcast, be sure to check the description below. While I strive to provide you with the most up-to-date and accurate information about nutrition, this is not a substitute for professional advice, and you should not rely solely on the information herein.